It's been an eventful start to the season. Some smashing sails from Inverkip to Lamlash to Campbelltown, and then a classic wind against tide push up the North Channel to escape the Clyde and reach Ballycastle in Northern Ireland. From there, a flight down the Irish coast to Derry / Londonderry, where some aspects of sailing with a disability ended up having a say. And to my mortal embarrassment, I had to get emergency help to sort out a catheter change that went very, very wrong.
Pray God this goes in first time.
Do you need fire, police and ambulance?
Ambulance, please. Good morning and welcome to Sailing Traleen. It is dawn on the 8th of April 2024 and I am berthed at Inverkip and just getting ready to stick my nose out of the marina and see what the conditions are like. It's been blowing a fierce gale for several days here, the 11th named storm of the United Kingdom season. The plan is to head out and see what the conditions are like. The wind should fall light, and indeed it's showing some signs of doing that already, but until we get out behind the hill we won't really know what's going on. I've got 2 reefs set in the main and the staysail ready to go, but I suspect that we'll be shaking that out early enough. Indeed, quite a lot of this passage may be made under engine, which is a pain, but that's the way of things, and I'm trying to position at the moment. I'm not really trying to have a nice sail. I'm just trying to position the boat further down the Clyde so we've got a better angle for getting it out and hopefully getting a shot round the west of the Hebrides. The day started full of promise, but soon enough I was shaking reefs out and I could see that the wind was beginning to fall light. Underway, we've been tacking down the Firth Clyde channel, but the wind has fallen below 10 knots and the tide's actually pushing against us, so we weren't making a huge amount of progress, and my decision is to get southwest in this narrow weather window, so I've actually just started motoring again, which is a bit depressing. Trying to work out whether the motor is getting the requisite water flow through it. Doesn't seem to be overheating, but it'd be really nice to know whether the thermostat's actually working properly, because that's one of the things that goes wrong with this engine, that it doesn't open and close correctly. It was a delight to be back in Lamlash Harbour, where I'd last been in January on my way up to Inverkip. Very different circumstances today indeed. Conditions were good enough for me to get the dinghy out and go ashore and have a little bit of an explore, and that was lovely because I've never been there, and it's a glorious wee town with amazing craft and all sorts of fine workers at work there. The weather, however, began to deteriorate quite quickly, so I got back onto the boat and began to prepare to depart for points west. Excuse me for looking like a mad golem. It's been a slightly rough night here at Lamlash and I didn't get as much sleep as I might have hoped. In fact, it's been a slightly rough few days here. I'm thinking seriously about uninstalling Predict Wind because it's just too good. And it incites you to make decisions that are apparently wise and informed, but in fact if you've been working with much less refined forecasts, probably would have added a fudge factor and gone, don't really like this very much, I think I'm going to run away. So the plan is to get out of here today because basically the southwesterly stroke southerly airflow is continuing, and the consequences of that is that this anchorage is not the best. So we're going to try and run away. We're underway out of Lamlash Harbour. The sea state is smooth and the wind is, I don't know, what's the wind doing? Wind's reporting 10 knots true.
boat's very comfortable under one reef in the main and full head sail set, and we're flying out into the Clyde in completely not the direction we want to go. However, we sort of have to go this way because I need to tack in order to get round ladder, and at the moment we won't make that tack, so we're carrying on out a good way, and it's a bit frustrating because at the moment the tide is on the windward bow, which means that this is a really inefficient tack, but I don't have enough sea room to put the tide on the lee bow and get the benefit of doing that. Essentially it's about vector maths, you get better advantage that way.
By the time Trelane was in a position to fetch Sander Island at the Mull of Kintyre, the latest forecast came in, and it became apparent that we would neither fetch Ballycastle nor Isla before the next blast of wind came in, so I decided to make for Campbelltown and accept that I was going to be stuck there for a good few days. As a port, it's a great and certain shelter, even if it's not somewhere I feel a huge affinity for. That evening I brought Trelane to an anchor berth in about 8 metres just to the east of the NATO fuel jetty, which so dominates the outer part of the loch, and we lay there for 2 nights before moving into the marina to weather a gale which brought 50 knots at times.
Good morning, I'm still in Campbelltown. It's been a fierce and terrible blow for the last couple of days, and I'm now about to go and have a shower and get rid of my rubbish.
And then hopefully we'll be departing here about midnight to catch the tide northward through the North Channel between the Mull of Kintyre and Fairlead. That tide turns fair at about 0600 local. I'll be crossing the channel towards Fairlead and Rathlin Island at about 45 degrees with the intent to pass into Rathlin Sound, perhaps to Ballycastle Harbour. I'm doing it this way, departing in the middle of the night, because the sail down to North Channel is routine, whereas if I left at about 6 PM I'd be facing the complex bit, crossing the channel, at what is the worst time for humans to make decisions, which is between 1 and 3 AM.
We've cleared the entrance to Campbelltown and we are now moving down towards Stanish Point, from where I think it's very likely that we'll be able to sail the boat.
And indeed, as the dawn began to break over Trelene's stern, we were indeed sailing, hard on the wind, beating up through the North Channel into the teeth of a northerly at 20 knots, with the tide running in the opposite direction. The sea conditions were verging on being pretty unpleasant, and this is where I'm so grateful that I've got a Vancouver hull under my backside. Trelane was such a good girl, just ate it up, smashing across the channel, and with the help of the tide giving us a good push, just laying Fairlead and the entrance of Rathlin Sound.
Morning all. I was up too late last night hunting Aurora, which in the end turned out to be a bit of a damp squib. It was a great Aurora, I think, but not until the sun went down can you see these things. So the problem was that the signal was really high while the sun was going down, but when we got to full dark it had vanished. Today the plan is to head down towards the Foyle Estuary, and it's forecast to be reasonably calm, and so I'm not sure how much sailing we will get. And I have a momentous announcement. Today is the first day of the year where the sun cream comes out properly. So I use this stuff that's actually formulated allegedly for children, and it's SPF 50 because my skin is ridiculously fair, and although you wouldn't know it now, when I was a child my hair was bright white.
Trelane has cleared the harbour. It's a gorgeous day. Classic high pressure weather. Unfortunately the high pressure is in completely the wrong place, so we've got soft northerlies instead of soft southwesterlies. I left the harbour at the same time as SV The Great Escape, which is sailing around Ireland and some of Scotland to raise awareness of mental health. They're lovely people and I wish them all the best.
This coast is relatively clean, but I'm coming off a little bit further in the hope that when I turn the angle down towards the foil we might get a little sail. The sea state is slight and the visibility is very good. As it happened, absolutely no wind eventuated, and the trip degenerated into a grim motor down a very pretty coast. The approach into the foil took Traleen through the ship anchorage for the port and then into the vast shallows of the loch. The tide here rips as a huge volume of water surfs its way out through the narrow entrance, and I was very glad still to be carrying the flood as I worked Traleen up the channel to come to a single anchor at Culmore, an anchorage so good that at times when it's very foggy, I gather the port sometimes has to anchor the inbound merchants unable to safely make the last 100 metres to the quay here.
Good morning. It's a glorious flat morning here at Culmore in the Foyle Estuary. It's a little anchorage tucked in just by the port, and it reminds me of some East Coast anchorages because look one way and you've got this intensely industrial scene, power plant, coal yard, bulk carriers discharging. Look the other way and you've got this glorious sort of Northern Ireland green community. It's a really weird one, and there's nature everywhere on one side and there's industry everywhere on the other, which is the East Coast bit. Had a really comfortable night here. The anchors held really well. Hopefully it will come up really well, which would be good because this is the sort of anchorage where you can expect there to be a lot of stuff on the bottom. And then the plan is to proceed further up the estuary into the city, up the river even into the city, and then to come to a pontoon there where I've been invited to berth by Foyle Port, which is incredibly kind of them, and I'm very grateful to the harbour master. Foyle Harbour Radio Traleen, permission to proceed this time to city centre from Culmore, over.
That should be okay, sir. They proceed up to the city.
Harbour Radio Traleen, thank you very much, out.
Foyle Port handles surprisingly big ships for a port located at the end of a very narrow and relatively shallow channel. They can take a 60,000 tonner, bulk carrier, and frequently do, as well as many smaller ships. The channel begins at Moville, many miles to the north, and is closely supervised by Harbour Radio, who are really on the ball and have been hugely supportive of Traleen during her time here. Leaving the anchorage, the morning was sublime, clear blue skies, flat water, and the foliage on the banks still has a deep green lustre of spring. The good weather, however, is in a way irritating. It's caused by a persistent high pressure sitting over the UK, which is dumping northerly winds into the Hebrides and very effectively making progress north for Traleen tricky. The channel into the city is a bit of a winding road, but there's really good buoyage and it's clear that the channel's been dredged very precisely, which is fantastic. Before Traleen could reach the city centre proper, we had to pass under the Foyle Bridge. This was built in '84, before the port moved to its current location in 1993, so it's sized to let really big ships through, with a clearance of 31 metres. That's so far above the top of Traleen's mast that it really shouldn't be stressful, but I don't like bridges and the perspective from the water always looks terrible. At Culmore I had virtually met Gary, an amputee sailor who sails an Omvi, SV kind of blue, and has some serious blue water achievements under his belt. He and his colleague from Foyle Sailability popped up to the city pontoon to take my lines, which was a great kindness, and we had a really nice chat afterwards over tea. The pontoons here are massive affairs, as befits something built by a commercial port. I gather they're rated for 1,000 tonnes, so any super yachts wanting a visit would find a welcome berth. The Foyle is an unquiet, muddy river, its flow carrying rich sediment into the loch and out to the ocean. The city it flows through, Derry / Londonderry too, has an unquiet past, and one which to all but those most intimately involved in the city and its history remains opaque, muddy even. Since the docks moved to a new deeper water site at Lishaley, the riverside has been redeveloped and is a heavily and apparently happily used route for transport and leisure. To remake a waterfront this successfully is no small victory of planning, and the distribution of development between the north and south banks in a network linked by the so-called Peace Bridge, which cuts the sinuous path across the river, is a sign of great hope. From a yachting perspective, the berthing provided by Foyle Port is stunning. Heavily fended pontoons bring yachts into the very heart of the city, with the city centre a few minutes in one direction and an all-important supermarket, post office, petrol station and industrial estate an equal few minutes in the other.
I'm taking the opportunity of being here in Derry / Londonderry to do a suprapubic catheter change. And the reason for that is that I want to get the maximum amount of time before I need to do another one while I'm out in the islands, because the likelihood of something going wrong with a suprapubic catheter is much greater when you change it than at any other point. So it makes sense to try and do it here in Derry / Londonderry, because there is a hospital here, whereas if I have to do it out on Barra, there isn't. In fact, the solution will be just to manage by other means and await until I can get a flight somewhere else to fix it. So yes, so we're going to try and do that here. And I'm a bit nervous because the last time we did this, it was in the radiology lab at Salisbury District Hospital with all sorts of people on hand, and it was a bit of a nightmare. So we'll see whether it's a bit of a nightmare right now here. I'm really hoping that it isn't, but if it is, that's the way things go.
Hi, it's Ian in the edit here. So a suprapubic catheter is simply a hollow tube that goes into the bladder and is held there by a balloon that blows up and can be deflated, and that drains urine directly out of the bladder. There are lots of advantages to doing it this way if you have to have a catheter, much better not to. But the big disadvantage is if when you go to do the change, if you can't get the new catheter into the stoma, that stoma will self-close really, really quickly. And so then you won't have a stoma, you won't have access to the bladder that way, and surgery will have to be done again, which is all very disadvantageous.
I think we have everything that we can hope for here. So the balloon in the bladder, which holds the catheter in place, should empty largely on its own. So this is a bit gory sometimes. No, that's a very effective solution. Pray God this goes in first time. Oh. I don't think I'm going to get this in. I don't think I'm going to get this in. Okay, so why can I... So, that's the stoma preserved. But I don't know why I can't get the catheter in. It's a complete nightmare.
I actually tried more than once to get the SBC into the stoma, but it's not illuminating to watch that. In the end, I managed to get a rigid catheter with a special tip into the bladder through the stoma, which allowed me to preserve the tract.
that catheter can't stay there, couldn't stay there because it's got no balloon for starters, so it just gets kicked out if you don't hold on to it. And secondly, it's completely the wrong sort and it would damage the bladder. So the net result is that I've gone from having a incredibly urgent problem to just an urgent problem, and that's why what happened next happened.
Do you need fire, police, and ambulance?
Ambulance, please.
Ambulance, thank you.
I have been attempting to do a suprapubic catheter change, which I do routinely. I cannot get the catheter in, so
Okay.
I am in need of someone in urgent care. What I have done
No
is
problem.
I'm not in this is not like we've got more than 20 minutes because I've got a straight catheter in, so I can get a more rigid catheter in, but I can't get the indwelling one in. So the stoma is preserved.
Right.
I'm very pleased to say that thanks to the amazing medics at Altnagavin Hospital here in Derry and to the whole NHS system here in Northern Ireland, I got myself sorted out. It turned out to be quite complicated to get another catheter in, and we had to change the sort that I've been using. But by 1 AM I had a new catheter in and was on my way back to the boat, which was fantastic. I've been frankly very sore for the last couple of days, which is what you expect when you've been messing around the way we were, and I'm just waiting now for a couple of spare catheters to arrive of the sort which we successfully got in, and then I will hopefully be on my way north.